He died at Memphis's Baptist Hospital this afternoon. Doctors say he died of respiratory failure. The 42-year-old Presley had been hospitalized several times in recent years for an eye problem and for exhaustion. For those of us who grew up with rock and roll music, Elvis Presley was the king. And all around the world tonight, millions of people are saddened because the king is dead.
Presley is dead at the age of 42, and we're going to have a look at his career right after this. Presley was taken from his Graceland mansion to Baptist Hospital in Memphis this afternoon. He was transported by ambulance and was described as being in serious condition. Presley died just a short time ago from what hospital officials call respiratory distress. Presley had been hospitalized several times in recent years for a variety of health problems. This is a scene from the Presley film, Loving You. It's hard to believe, but Elvis made films like this for almost 20 years. He played a major role in American popular music since the mid-50s. Cam, recently there have been stories about people waiting in line 2 or 3 days just to get tickets to his concerts.
Stricken about 2:30 this afternoon by Joe Esposito, his road manager. Attempts to revive him at home and at Baptist Hospital, both were unsuccessful today.
Apparently it was a heart attack. He was found at his home in Memphis, not breathing. His road manager tried to revive him. He failed. A hospital tried to revive him. It failed. His doctor pronounced him dead at 3 o'clock this afternoon. The end, at an early age, of one of the two most spectacular careers in the history of American entertainment, the other being Frank Sinatra's. Long after he became an institution, here's how Presley looked and sounded on an NBC television special 4 seasons ago. He sold records in the multiples of millions, made millions, bought a string of Cadillacs one after another, gave away a string of Cadillacs to people he liked, and along the way was married in 1967 to Priscilla Ann Beaulieu. The very symbol of sex for all those hundreds of thousands of teenagers was married only once, and then relatively late. They had one child, a daughter, and the marriage did not last very long. It ended in divorce. He was a part of American popular history. In the 1950s, the great swing era of Benny Goodman, Artie Shaw, and Tommy Dorsey was about dead. The big band pop music had become what was called bop or bebop. Remote, obscure, bloodless, nobody liked it, you couldn't dance to it. And then here came Elvis with a hot, stomping, steamy, sexy kind of music that turned people on as pop music never had before. Others came along, including the Beatles, but they were all indebted to him, and most of them said so. He died today. Even though he didn't smoke, drink, or drive his own car, he quit breathing at the age of 42. NBC will have a special on Elvis Presley tonight at 11:30 Eastern Time. John?
Hospital officials said he died of respiratory distress, but they were no more specific than that. In recent years, Presley was plagued by weight problems and fatigue. His trademark was his gyrating hips, a style so controversial that when he began gyrating during a 1956 appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show, he was shown only from the waist up.
You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, crying all the time. Well, you ain't never put a rabbit in.
That song, Hound Dog, was one of the Presley records that sold 1 million copies, and there were more than 30 of them. And tonight, a spokeswoman for the Memphis Police Department said detectives were investigating, quote, the strong possibility that Presley's death was a result of an overdose of drugs.
News that Elvis Presley is dead at the age of 42. It was a severely irregular heartbeat. No drugs involved, they say. Here was a man who was such a public figure that he had to spend his entire life in private. Presley started his own career. Behind him, Elvis went on to worldwide fame. Millions of dollars, a career that you know as well as I do. In his most recent appearances, it was obvious that Elvis was overweight and out of condition. He worried about it. He went into a hospital just 4 months ago and came out with a clean bill of health. And he was just about to start again on a big concert tour. They found him dead in his home at Memphis at about 2 this afternoon. He might have been lying there as long as 5 hours. Doctors could not find any sign of life. When word got out that Elvis was dead, we had dozens of phone calls, so did the radio stations, and the record stores saw a lot of activity too. There's no doubt that Elvis Presley has more fans across all age groups than any other entertainer has ever had. At Record Rendezvous, reporter Jay Backus heard a typical story from one of the salesmen there, Al Solomon.
The albums have picked up. They don't usually sell like every day, but one guy came in about $40 worth.
How many albums was that?
8 albums.
8 of them tonight?
Right. Just tonight. He was scared that a lot of people would be rushing in and getting all the albums.
Dave, of course, it was here, right in the city of Cleveland, that Elvis broke some of his biggest records ever. It was a time in radio days that WJW's Carl Reese remembers very, very well.
Elvis received tremendous help and support at the station I worked for. It was WERE. I might mention Bill Randall, who was one of the first big jocks to throw his support to Elvis Presley. But something is gone that's never going to be here again.
It's still too soon to talk about funeral plans, but there's no doubt that it will be one of the biggest ever in Memphis as Elvis fans and show business stars come in to pay their final respects in about a week.
We sent Lucetti to the Front Row Theater tonight to talk to some people who I guess knew him personally.
Yeah, some well, some not so well. At least they met him, Doug, and to find out what kind of a man Elvis was, we went to people who saw him backstage from time to time. You'll recognize this first gentleman, a well-known performer. The second man once went with Elvis on tour.
Gentlemen, the concert sound of Henry Mancini.
And I met him on the set once at Paramount. He was doing one of his many films, and very nice man. I got a very good impression from him, and I think it's a very, it's in a way, it's like comparing it to the losing of, let's say, Louis Armstrong in his field and in jazz field, because just because the rock field isn't that old doesn't mean that it doesn't have that penetration.
He was a great guy. He was just a nice, very nice, gentle person, and very generous, both with his, excuse me, with his time, monetarily.
Back in the early 50s, Elvis once got an unexpected chance to sing Blue Suede Shoes on the Ed Sullivan Show. You see, another singer who was scheduled to appear that very night was in a car accident. Well, Elvis substituted, and he did very well. But he never forgot that other singer, a fellow named Carl Perkins. He never became very famous. Elvis helped Perkins' career whenever he had the chance. Doug?
Thank you, Lou, and you too, Adele. And NBC will have a special program on the life of Elvis Presley this evening at 11:30, immediately following our program.
We told you doctors in Memphis now say that Elvis Presley died today as the result of an erratic heartbeat or heart attack brought on by undetermined causes. They say an autopsy shows no evidence of any illegal drugs in his system. Elvis Presley was one of twins. His brother Jesse died at birth. His mother Gladys also died of heart failure at age 42. He sold 400 million records, and while Clevelander Alan Freed coined the term rock and roll, Elvis Presley defined it as a blend of rhythm and blues and country music. In spite of recent serious weight problems and an eye disorder that required hospitalization, Elvis Presley remained one of the top attractions in show business. He sold out wherever he played. He made 31 movies. Though he never challenged for an Academy Award, his films were always successful at the box office. A career that early critics said would be fleeting lasted the rest of Elvis Presley's lifetime. Memphis had been Elvis Presley's home since high school, and tonight that town is a city in shock.
The king is dead. Elvis Presley, the hip-gyrating king of rock and roll music, died at his Graceland mansion of heart failure. The 42-year-old singer was found lying on his bed by his road manager, Joe Esposito, who attempted mouth-to-mouth resuscitation without success. While he was being rushed to the hospital, efforts to revive him in the ambulance failed. His personal physician attempted to revive him without success.
I was upstairs in his bedroom, and I went upstairs to talk to him. He wasn't breathing. I talked to him last night, and we discussed some songs we were going to do on the tour and everything.
There were no signs of ill health?
None whatsoever.
As word of Elvis's death spread around the world, a large crowd began gathering at the Presley home.
Well, we saw him last night. You know, we waited and waited for him to come out of the gate, and he went back in again, and he was smiling and waved and everything as if he was in real good health. Looked real good last night.
Elvis's friends say he was in a good mood recently. They said he was looking forward to beginning an extended concert tour this week.
I can't believe it.
It's
not real.
No, it's not. It's our friend.
Presley family members say funeral arrangements are still incomplete. Tim Wilshire reporting for CBS News in Memphis, Tennessee.
Clevelander Tommy Edwards knew Elvis Presley, a friendship that goes back over 2 decades. Today, Tommy Edwards in town runs a record store, but back then, Tommy was a disc jockey at what was then WERE, a pop and country music station. News Center 8's Barbara Caffey right now is with Tommy Edwards at his record store. Barbara?
Tommy, I'd like to ask you, how did you first meet Elvis?
Well, I hired him for a show that we were doing at the Circle Theater at 102nd and Euclid back in 1955 in February. Got him for $300 for 2 shows.
At that time, did you see him as a star?
No, I never really did. I thought he'd be around for maybe a couple of years, and then he'd go off in the distance again like so many of the rock stars of the day. But I never anticipated. I could gild the lily and say, oh, I thought he was going to be a big star, but I never thought he was going to do it. But he proved me wrong. He was a great star.
What made Elvis that star so that he stayed at the top?
I think it was that mystique about him, because very few people ever really saw him. Maybe 10,000 or 20,000 people at a performance here at the Coliseum. You never saw him on TV except in movies. And it was a kind of a mystical thing. And I think Americans always love somebody who has made a success of himself. And he certainly made a success of himself.
Thank you, Tommy. This is Barbara Caffey with the City Cam, live for News Center 8.
The word fan comes from fanatic, and that's exactly what Gary Frank is when it comes to Elvis Presley. Gary, a 32-year-old Lakewood policeman, has spent thousands of dollars on Elvis Presley records, books, magazines, and even films and kinescopes of Presley's TV appearances. And he met Presley once in Las Vegas.
It hits me like I lost a brother who I never really got to know. I've been collecting Elvis since I was 11 years old. All his recordings, films I could get a hold of, books and everything else. I bought a Sony Betamax just about, I guess it was the beginning of last week, because the Your Network's going to have a special on them in either September or October, and I was counting on filming that. And since Elvis isn't in the movies any longer, I was hoping to record movies off the television to keep for posterity.
Elvis Presley had few fans as fanatic as Gary Frank, but all over the world tonight, people are saddened at the passing of the king of rock and roll.
Of the body, there was pandemonium as the people pressed against the gates trying to get in. Many fainted from the heat in the tightly packed crowd. Despite pleas from police to spread out, the crush became worse. And late this afternoon, 50 National Guardsmen were called out to assist in crowd control. The family extended the hours for public viewing, but Shelby County Sheriff Eugene Barksdale said that even so, many would not be able to see the body. Those who did get in walked up the long drive to the house itself and entered a small anteroom, which was almost filled with a copper casket containing the body of Elvis Presley. He was dressed in a white tuxedo, wearing a simple silver tie. Many of the people, as they came out, were crying. Tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock, private funeral services will be held at Graceland. Then the funeral procession will move up the street Memphis named after its most famous citizen to a mausoleum at Forest Hill Cemetery. Jackson Bain, NBC News, in Memphis.
It was the classic American success story. Poor boy from small town rises to top. The town, Tupelo, Mississippi. The boy, Elvis Aaron Presley, the son of Vernon and Gladys Presley, born here in 1935. As news of his death began to spread, people started bringing flowers to his birthplace, a modest two-room house. The women of the local garden club operate the Presley home as a tourist attraction. They say that to the people of Tupelo, Elvis was more than just a popular singer. He was representative of the American dream.
Our idea in opening this house to the public was to show that impossible dreams can still come true, that miracles do still happen, that from humble beginnings, people are still able to make something of themselves if they have the desire.
A lot of Tupelo people will be at Elvis Presley's funeral tomorrow. They feel they owe him a lot. He gave them something to brag about. George Lewis, NBC News, Tupelo, Mississippi.
Thank you, and good night for all of us at NBC News.
Outlets here, and 6 were completely sold out of Elvis records. The other 2 had very few left. In one store, a woman bought every Elvis record in stock. Her bill, almost $300. There's no doubt that the 42-year-old singer was the king of rock and roll, and apparently still is.
8,000 people are waiting in a vigil outside the mansion. Here's how it was in Memphis today.
Memphis police today escorted the body of Elvis Presley from a funeral home through city streets to Graceland, Presley's 14-acre estate. When they caught sight of the police-escorted motorcade, hundreds of Presley's waiting fans ran to try to catch a glimpse of the coffin as it was returned to the mansion through a back entrance. Some had maintained a vigil for hours in front of a wrought iron gate and along the 10-foot-high brick wall surrounding the estate. Others had driven hundreds of miles to get here and were caught in a traffic jam on Elvis Presley Boulevard in front of the mansion.
I'm here to see Elvis for the last time.
What was your reaction when you heard the news?
I was very sad. My whole household was very sad.
Afternoon temperatures rose into the 90s. The scheduled viewing of Presley's body was delayed an hour. The crowd grew and people began fainting. A small stream of fans was finally permitted to enter the mansion, but cameras were prohibited. Angered by what they termed ill treatment by the authorities, the crowd became unruly and officials threatened to cancel the public viewing. Meanwhile, relatives and close friends have been invited to attend private funeral services for Presley tomorrow. Ed Rabel, CBS News, Memphis.
TV preacher Rex Humbard of Akron will deliver the eulogy at Presley's funeral tomorrow. Humbard says he spent considerable time in tearful prayer with the singer, most recently last fall when they met at Presley's request and discussed the Bible and prayed. Humbard says Elvis appeared to be a man cramming for the last big exam. CBS and TV8 will air an Elvis Presley special narrated by Charles Kuralt right after News Center tomorrow night at 11:30.